welcome Paul Campus. Some of you may have known him. He's been working for several years. I don't want to guess how many, to help Acton switch off gas-powered leaf blowers. He has been recently successful in their town meeting, and you're going to hear more about that. Paul, like some of the other of our neighbors, worked for Digital Equipment Corporation. He's got a background in electrical engineering from Cornell and has written a book on Digital Equipment Corporation, DEC as it's known. So some of us have some common threads in there, some of our background, some of our experience, but some of that has nothing at all to do with tonight's talk, I don't think, but we'll find out. So Paul, thank you very much for joining us. Welcome.
Right. Thanks, Rick. So, this has been a journey. I eventually was happily retired, and about 2.5 years ago, I read in the news that Lexington had successfully passed a bylaw phasing out gas-powered leaf blowers. And the noise had always bothered me. I didn't know too much more about them. So I emailed the local select board and said, is this something that we can do? And they said, well, if you lead it, you can do it. And so that's where the journey began. And so what's most interesting, and what I think a lot of people don't understand, is that when I first got into it, it was because of the noise. I had no idea about the amount of pollution, air pollution and greenhouse gas that a 25-pound piece of equipment could produce. And I think a lot of people in Stow and Acton and other towns really don't appreciate the amount of toxic production that these machines make until somebody tells them about it. And so
we do appreciate the noise, though.
Yeah, they do understand the noise, but the noise is the least of the problems when it comes to serious issues. And so once I discovered that a 25-pound machine can create 300 times the carbon monoxide of a 6,000-pound Ford pickup truck, I was just staggered. And the more I read about it, the more the crazier it got. And one of the things in rural towns, semi-rural towns like Stow and Acton, is we've never had noise ordinances or never had an air pollution problem. So the Board of Health and a lot of residents are really not that well educated. For example, in Acton, and it sounds like in Stow, we've discovered we have PFAS problems, and people are really a lot smarter now about PFAS, and towns are spending quite a bit of money on filtering that stuff out. And so, but when it comes to air pollution and noise in towns like Stow and Acton, there really hasn't been much awareness or concern. And I presented to the Board of Health in Acton, and they really weren't that interested in the whole situation. So then so last year I did a citizen petition at town meeting to phase them out, and that got bounced back to the select board. There was quite a bit of organized opposition. And this year, the select board took it on to sponsor the bylaw at town meeting. And Green Acton and I and others did a lot of campaigning to get people to town meeting. Acton has an open town meeting, which is harder. It's harder to get a bylaw passed versus a representative town meeting, where you know exactly who's going to be in the room and who you should be communicating with. And but this year we did a much more concerted campaign, and were able to pass the bylaw. So in doing all this, I've developed, I know more about leaf blowers and lawn equipment than I ever thought I ever would. And so now that we've had some success in Acton, I really do want to share this with other towns. And I'm working with some people across the country and trying to help them accomplish what we did. So what I'd like to do is go into screen share mode now, if that's enabled here. Let's see. And I go through some slides that I've developed over the time. So can you see that?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so here's I think there's about 19 slides here. it's kind of interesting that this year is the 250th anniversary of the, of the revolution. And so I did a little photoshopping on the Concord Minuteman here and got them equipped for the new revolution in the green landscaping equipment. So I'm just going to go right into the next slide here and talk about it. So the so what I tell people and what is true is the train has left the station. The gas leaf blower era is coming to a rapid end. A lot of towns have passed it. Landscapers come up with a lot of reasons why you shouldn't do it, but it works. It's proven in a lot of places, and there's really no doubt that it's feasible and it saves money. And so it's really not a difficult decision rationally that this is the time to switch equipment. So my next slide is I get into some of the equipment. A lot of people aren't that familiar with battery leaf blowers, and here I'm focused more on the larger, more powerful ones that landscapers tend to use. And so there's two kinds of vendors providing this equipment. There's vendors that have always been all electric, and that's Greenworks and Ego. And there's gas vendors that are switching over to battery because they see the handwriting on the wall. And Echo is one example of a gas-powered leaf blower company that is now putting out a full line of battery-powered equipment. Steel is another company doing that, and Husqvarna is doing that. So the gas-powered companies are jumping on board because they see the handwriting on the wall. And what really got their attention was last year, California banned the sale of all gas-powered lawn equipment, leaf blowers, weed whackers, and lawnmowers in the state because they have a serious pollution issue in California. And so when California bans all their equipment, it does get their attention. So don't want to spend too much time here. So the way that the power of gas-powered leaf blowers is most effectively measured is with newtons. Newtons is what do I have here? Is the force needed to accelerate 1 kilogram of mass at the rate of 1 meter per second. So when you look at leaf blowers, you see newtons, you see cubic feet per minute, you see velocity. Newtons tends to be the best indicator of the true power force of a leaf blower. So here we have two tiers, a 25 Newton and a 35 Newton. I have a 25 Newton. It's quite a powerful machine. 35 Newton is competitive with the gas leaf blowers, and that's what typically so the range of commercial leaf blowing tends to be 30 to 40 newtons. So they would typically buy the ones on the top row there. So what I've done here is to get people a sense of the price of switching over is I've configured each of these products with a substantial amount of battery capacity so that you could run them for 3 hours on a combination of high and turbo. Turbo is the boost speed, which a lot of the landscapers use. So each price here, each package price includes the blower and enough battery to run for 3 hours.
But most of us are homeowners, so we're not landscapers. So you may want.
Correct. Okay. Okay, so let me just go back. So this leaf blower you see in the hand of the Minuteman is actually the product that I have. It's a handheld leaf blower. It's 26 newtons, and it's from Ego. It costs on Amazon. You can get the leaf blower with one large battery and a charger for $300. So just to give you a sense of this, a battery leaf blower will last 10 years. And so $300 divided by 10 years is roughly $30 a year, which is basically 2 pizzas. So people say they can't afford battery leaf blowing. It's, if you look at the total lifetime cost, it's really very, very affordable. Okay. So one of the big points of confusion here is cost, because battery leaf blowers cost more than gas leaf blowers, but the operating cost of battery leaf blowers is 13 times less than gas leaf blowers. And the question people ask is, how can it be 13 times less? What is going on that makes a battery leaf blower 13 times more efficient? So what I've done here is I've created a little visual of what the cost is to run. Another, this is for a commercial operator running 500 hours. For a home operator, it would probably be 50 hours a week. So we'd have a different set of numbers. Okay, but my primary focus here was people using the commercial landscapers. But the physics doesn't change. And so gas powered leaf blowers, as many of you know, is they use two-stroke engines. In two-stroke engines, you mix the oil in with the gas, like in outboard motors and things like that, and the oil gets burned with the gas. So to run a gas-powered leaf blower by a landscaper for a year is about 500 hours of usage. And so that adds up to about $1,124 operating cost per year, oil $382, gasoline $743. Now the question is, where does that money go? So first of all, oil burns very, very poorly. And it's basically almost no oil burns in an efficient way that creates any useful force in a gas-powered leaf blower. So basically that $382 goes straight into air pollution, because a lot of that are what are called unburned hydrocarbons, and that turns into soot and all kinds of nasty stuff. Now down with the gas, so in a two-stroke engine, 30% of the gasoline is unburned, and that goes into air pollution. So that adds another amount of money up there. And 70% gets burned, which goes into a combination of heat and force. Now, two-stroke engines are, the thermal efficiency, which means how much power actually turns into, how much of the energy or the gasoline turns into power is only 15%. So you can see that of the 70% of the gas burned, 85% goes into heat and 15% goes into force. So out of the $1,124 you're spending on running that thing by a commercial landscaper, only $78 actually turns into usable force. The rest of it turns into heat, which is not a big problem, but a lot of it goes into pollution, which is a big problem. On the battery side, as all you electric guys really know, that battery electric motors are 85% efficient. And so 85% of the energy goes into force. So to get the same amount of energy, you only have to use $102 of electricity. So there's why gas leaf blowers, a lot of their problem is they are very, very inefficient. And that turns into cost, and that turns into pollution. Okay, so now let's move on to what are the actual costs. Now, it turns out that Stow, probably the largest manufacturer of gas lawn care equipment, has a calculator online as to how to calculate your savings of battery versus gas. And you just plug in how many hours you use it, how many gallons of gas you burn, and what your electricity cost is, and it'll tell you for the data that I put in that your savings per leaf blower would be $1,022. And then you add on to that the fact that gas leaf blowers require servicing. They require spark plugs and filters and tune-ups, which is roughly $150 a year. So your total savings is $122 plus $150, which gets you down to about $1,172 per year. So if you divide out what's gas and what's electric, so the gas turns out to be $1,274 a year, and the electricity costs $102 per year. So that's where you get the 13-to-1 difference. So these numbers are really counterintuitive to a lot of people, and require people, really don't understand, why the payback is so fast. So that's where I get into this slide. So this slide, we look at, the cost over 5 years of purchase and usage of a battery leaf blower and a gas leaf blower. So you can see on the bottom here, the battery leaf blower costs substantially more. It costs, $2,100. And the gas leaf blower costs $550. And so landscapers look at the purchase cost and say, wow, this is way more expensive. But now you add in the operating costs, and you can see very quickly that at $102 per year, the operating cost adds very little to the total cost. And at $1,300 per year, the operating cost adds very, very substantially to that. So over 5 years, the savings in moving for a commercial landscaper to one battery-powered leaf blower is $4,419, which is a very substantial amount of money, as you can see. So I'm going to just stop here if anybody has any questions, because this really is some people find hard to believe.
You got one from Ann.
Yeah, this is an eye opener, Paul. Thanks. I still have I have an electric leaf blower that's a plug-in. It's maybe 20 years old or 5 years old. But on the I didn't realize that gas leaf blowers, are they exclusively two-stroke? Because I have my old Honda gas-powered mower. That's a 4-stroke.
Right.
And is that just a generic difference between leaf blowers and other lawn equipment?
Well, that's a good point. So any piece of equipment that's handheld and you're rotating and tipping and whatever cannot use an oil pan. Okay. And so all the equipment that rides on the ground, like lawnmowers, uses a 4-stroke engine and they separate the gas and the oil. But typically things like chainsaws, where you're moving them around, in leaf blowers, the most effect, and weight is a big deal. So you don't want to pick up a lot of weight. So that the vast majority use 2-stroke engines. A few use 4-stroke engines, but they mix the oil in with the gas. So the benefit is substantially less than from a standard 4-stroke engine. So most handheld equipment is 2-stroke engines.
Okay, you've got a question from Alan?
Yeah, Paul, you haven't told us what the difference in decibels is.
So the difference in decibels, okay, I have a slide later on, but it's
Maybe you should go on, Paul, and yeah, because I know you've got some on decibels.
yeah, let me hold that question for a little bit later, okay? And we'll get into that. I have to say that I left a lot of the noise out because that really didn't get anybody's attention. So even they were people are much more concerned about health than about noise. And so, but I will speak to that. Okay. So this right here, so just looking at these slides is really important for people to understand. They can't really, it's hard to believe that the cost, the operating cost is so substantially different, and how that changes the whole picture in terms of affordability. Okay. So here, the second question is, does delaying the transition from gas to battery leaf blowers save money? So on the left side here, you buy your battery leaf blower year one for $2,500, and this is your operating cost down here. And this one, you buy your leaf blower in year 4 for the same price, and this is your gas operating cost. So you add up all the costs, and you can see that the total cost of the early transition is $3,000, and the total cost of the late transition is $6,600. So again, this I have found is counterintuitive to many people. That many people believe the longer you hold on to something and run it into the ground, the better it is financially. But when it comes to this kind of operating cost differential, it's totally not true. So this is another piece of data that's really important for people to understand. Okay, now we're going to get a little bit into lawn care techniques. So if you talk to Echo Quiet, George Corrett, who Rick Lent has been talking to recently, they've been using battery leaf blowers since they were in their infancy. So they have come up with ways of getting leaf cleanup done with the least amount of blowing. And the technique they're actually using now is we can see on the left, the typical landscaper comes in and blows everything either to the street or into the woods. So everything is blown. What the electric landscapers like George Corrett is what they use their lawnmowers a lot more. And what he does, he uses the side chute and he just spirals around, gets all the leaves in the middle of the yard into a big pile, and then just does much less blowing, on this side. So they have techniques now that they use more lawnmower and less blowing. Now, if you're using gas lawnmower, you're probably thinking, well, they're burning gas, but gas lawnmowers produce a lot less nasty pollution and noise than gas leaf blowers do. And now with George Corrett, he uses electric lawnmowers, and so that's not a problem there either. So there are techniques. I'm going to get into this a little more in a couple of slides of how to take care of leaves with less blowing. Because to be honest, when you're blowing, even with battery leaf blowers, you're still producing particulates in the air by blowing them off the ground that are not healthy for people. So there is some particulate pollution from battery leaf blowers in blowing stuff off the lawn. Okay. So okay, here's something that I think you'll be interested in. So leaves are misunderstood. Leaves are treasure, not trash. Leaves are the best nutrients you could ask for right on your lawn. All you need to do is turn them into mulch to get them to fertilize your lawn and your gardens faster than having them left whole. So there's a variety of ways to do that. And here in the center, you can see kind of the cycle of decomposition. You have insects, worms, and microbes that turn leaves into nitrogen and minerals, and there's the whole cycle here. So leaves are treasure, not trash. They're badly misunderstood. So one of the techniques to do is just to mulch. If your leaf coverage isn't too heavy, to mulch your leaves right into your lawn with your lawnmower with a mulching blade. And you can do that with a fair amount of leaves on the lawn. And it turns out, if you go down to the middle here, there's a lot of benefits of mulching the leaves into the lawn. You get improved soil health because they provide nutrients, fertility, microbial activity, reduced need for artificial fertilizer, thatch reduction, clippings prevent thatch buildup that smothers grass, water conservation, the mulch layer helps retain moisture, natural weed control, all kinds of good stuff. Now, if you ask the landscapers about why they don't do this, they will say, and it shows up over here, they will say, oh, when you mulch the leaves, it acidifies your lawn and hurts the grass. It's absolutely not true. It temporarily, even with oak leaves, which are acid, you get a very short-term amount of acidity that disappears, and it is not a problem. So that's one of the pushbacks that people will get from landscapers. Okay, number 2, bag mulching. So if you have a lawnmower with a bag on it, whether the lawnmower is gas or electric, you just mulch the leaves into your bag and then drive your lawnmower to wherever you want to use the mulch and dump them into your garden. Here I put them around a tree that I have using that. Okay, the other format here is you blow or rake your leaves into a pile, and then you run your lawnmower over the pile and turn your leaves into mulch. And it only takes a couple of minutes, and it reduces the volume of leaves by 10 times. So even if you're going to drag them away in a tarp, you've reduced the volume by 10 times. And when you mulch them this way versus the bag mulching, you get smaller pieces, which decompose even faster. So here's a couple of pictures on the right side here of before and after driving my lawnmower. This is my battery-powered lawnmower over the mulch. And then down here, then I shoveled it into a wheelbarrow and shoveled the mulch into my garden. So while I'm on this slide, so I do have a battery-powered lawnmower. You can see it here. It's about 8 or 9 years old. It's an early one. It's by Cobalt. And it came with 2 batteries and a fast charger. And I can do my lawn. I use one battery, and when that's done, I put it into the charger, use the second battery, and by the time the second battery is used up, the one in the charger has been recharged, I can go back to the first battery. Now, I've had these about 8 or 9 years, and the batteries have lost some of their capacity, but not a significant amount, and it hasn't become a problem yet. So I do want to stop here for a second because I think there may be some questions and see if you have any. Well, okay.
I think we're good.
Okay.
Oh,
Okay.
Oh, Arnie's got one.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'll ask the same question, Paul. The efficiency of a electric lawnmower versus a 4-stroke gas. I mean, that wouldn't show, I would guess. I would be assuming that it would be similar to the efficiency of an EV electric vehicle versus a internal combustion engine vehicle. Is that
which is about 2 to 1, right?
I think it's more like 3 or 4 to 1.
Okay.
But it's significant, but it's not the I mean, you were showing like 13
Right.
to 1 or something.
Correct. You are absolutely correct. With a 4-stroke lawnmower, your operating cost savings are more in the range of 3 to 4 to 1 or than 13 to 1 because the 4-stroke engine is substantially more energy efficient.
And I presume, I mean, I used to have, believe it or not, one of those plug-in electric lawnmowers. I don't know that they sell those anymore. You had to be very careful that you didn't run over the cord. But, you know, is that still, I mean, for me, I have a small yard, both for mowing and for leaf blowing. You know, with a long extension cord, I can just plug that in and use it. Is there a reason not to do that versus getting a, you know, a battery powered lawn equipment either?
I think, Arnie, that you appreciate the value of electrification more than most people, and therefore are willing to manage the extension cord. I think most people really don't want to have a cord, but I agree. I think corded equipment. I mean, there's no battery charging. There's none of that hassle, and you know, and so I think that corded equipment, if you have the small enough yard, is a great idea. Okay. Okay. No other questions? Okay. No. So one of the things, again, going to town meeting, we're dealing with people that are using landscapers and the landscapers, as a few slides down, I'll tell you what some of the things they're telling their customers. But one question here is, well, how significant is leaf cleanup really to a landscaper's revenue? So I talked to George Corrett, the fellow at Echo Quiet, and a few others. And this is the typical, so Acton is typically half-acre lawns. And so if you hire a landscaper, this is your typical bill. It's $2,500. It's $1,750 for lawn mowing. It's $250 for bark mulching, and it's $500 for leaf cleanup. So leaf cleanup and there's some battery leaf blowing used in other places, but much, much, much less. And in many cases, it's not really necessary. So it's really only 25% of their revenue. So if you ever go into town meeting with a bill like this in Stow, and they're saying it's going to put me out of business, it's really only 20% of their revenue. Sometimes if they do hardscaping and things like that, it's less of their revenue. And so putting it in perspective, the leaf cleanup portion of a landscaper's business is quite modest. And in moving to electric to battery equipment, it all gets paid back in 18 months. So it's really a short-term inconvenience and cost. And so that's what this slide talks to here. This is actually a picture I took in Acton a couple weeks ago. So people have spring cleanup, and this year they're really, here's a landscaper who's getting paid to do spring cleanup, and there really were no leaves on this person's lawn. And this landscaper is basically blowing nothing because that's what the owner wanted. I don't blame the landscaper, I blame the owner. That's what the owner wanted. And the owner was willing to pay, probably $300 or whatever for spring cleanup, and there weren't any leaves on the lawn. It's a little crazy. Okay, so here's some landscaper claims and that I want to talk to for a few minutes. So this diagram on the upper right here, this is on the Stow website. Stow has really jumped onto the battery powered bandwagon, and they say on their website, this is a guy, Armando Vega, he's a landscaper, and he says, this is Stow, in my opinion, the battery equipment matches and even surpasses the gas-powered equipment. So this comes from a gas leaf blower manufacturer. So the time is ripe to get rid of that stuff because even they are bailing out. So the point that I make here is that there's really two ways to look at the transition from gas to battery. The first way is I call the proactive approach, is that the landscaper, you actually care about the health of your customers and your workers, and you start transitioning now, giving you more time to figure things out at your own speed, building knowledge and competence. This way you become the business that customers move to, not move from. If you are a lawn purchaser, this is the kind of landscaper you want. And the other approach, which is the predominant of the gas-powered people, is the deny and delay. You seek to delay the transition as long as possible, even though it saves your money and it's good for your workers and it's good for the health of your customers. So there's really two attitudes here. And down here, I'll just quickly say so here are four of the big things that landscapers will say. It'll put me out of business. It doesn't work. They aren't powerful enough, and I will have to raise my prices. All are untrue and provable. There's no evidence anywhere that any of those are true. And enough said there. So here is so DC switched over to launch from gas to electric leaf blowers on January 1st, 2022. And in 2018, they held hearings for landscapers to come in and to talk to, what their comments were about the transition. And I'm just going to read this to you. I have an annotated version of this is a woman. So a woman landscaper in DC named Nancy Sainberg. And this is her testimony. It's really, and I'm going to give you some annotations. It says, "Good afternoon. My name is Nancy Sainberg. I'm the owner of the Enchanted Garden, a landscaping company in DC." So right away, you can see with a company name of Enchanted Garden, this isn't your typical landscaper. Right? We've been in business for 30 years. The majority of our business in DC. We provide services to clients with properties as small as townhouses and large as several acres. You may hear some testimony today. Now, this is in 2018. Testimony today that it is not possible for landscape professionals to do our job without gas-powered leaf blowers. But I can tell you from my own experience that that is completely untrue. We've been using only battery-powered equipment for the past 2 years, starting in 2016, and have had no trouble keeping up with the work in a timely manner. We've had no complaints from clients that our services are taking more time and heard nothing but compliments on low noise levels from battery leaf blowers. Now, the next piece here is really interesting. My epiphany regarding the switch from gas blowers to battery blowers occurred 2 years ago. I was out walking my dog and heard a leaf blower. When I got closer to the noise, I realized it was my own landscape crew who were finishing up an installation in my neighborhood. I had heard it from over 2 blocks away. That was it for me. The noise pollution was too much. Now, the question you have here is, why didn't she notice this when she was, running the business as opposed to being a pedestrian? So on the left side here in the second paragraph, there's an interesting thing. It's called cognitive appraisal theory. It says that when a noise is perceived as controllable or necessary, your brain is able to filter it out. It's a coping mechanism, but otherwise it can be disturbing. So when Nancy was in landscaper mode, it was controllable and necessary, and she filtered it out. But when she was walking her dog mode, it drove her crazy, and that's why she changed. It's a really interesting kind of thing into human behavior. So, okay, next thing. I went out the next week and bought a battery-powered leaf blower to see how well it worked. The initial reaction from my crew was, okay, we'll give this toy a try. So one of the big things here is a lot of people believe that if it don't make noise, it don't make power. That noise and power are directly equatable. But pretty soon they were favoring the battery-powered blowers over the gas blowers. The following season, we switched to all battery-powered equipment. Now, this is 2017. This is 8 years ago. The crew asked if we could keep one gas leaf blower for the fall cleanup. I decided to see what would happen. Once the season came, no one even mentioned using gas leaf blowers. The people who worked with this equipment every day have said that they enjoy using it much more than the gas equipment. They're not subjected to high noise levels and don't have headaches at the end of the day, which was often a complaint. So two of the things, so the headaches are the result of carbon monoxide poisoning. And also landscapers complained from other interviews of exhaustion. Exhaustion is the result of carbon monoxide poisoning because it attaches to your hemoglobin and doesn't allow you to absorb much oxygen. So headaches. And the third thing that we discovered actually very recently is that a lot of landscapers are getting a lot of the particulates into their eyes, and their eyes are getting damaged from the particulates. So that's part of the health view of it. So here's a woman who runs a successful business. She's been on battery equipment for since 2016 for 9 years, works fine. So one of the things here that that's kind of interesting is that maybe, maybe women landscapers get it and men landscapers don't get it. That this equipment is somehow they get addicted to this noise and equipment, and it's not true for women. So there may be some kind of a gender bias here. Who knows?
So Paul, we put off, Alan, I'm going to reach out to
Noise.
you. We put you off on your question about 20, 25 minutes ago.
Mhm.
Have we gotten to that point where you want to raise that question?
So I think I don't know that. Let me look at here. I think I didn't put my noise slide in here. So why don't we talk about noise here? Okay, I'm trying to keep the slide set small as possible. So a gas leaf blower at the ear of the operator is roughly 105 decibels. Okay, a battery leaf blower at the ear of the operator is like 75 decibels. 50 feet away, a battery leaf blower is 65 decibels and a gas leaf blower is 85 decibels. So at the ear of the operator, 105 decibels is like sitting on the runway at Logan Airport and having planes take off right over your head.
So
Okay.
Alan, but I don't know what your question was, Alan. Was it about noise level or?
Yeah. You know, uh, the neighbor I have here often does his own leaf blowing, and he does it daily after work for whatever 4 leaves are down. And it's pretty loud. And I was wondering how much less loud it would be if it were. And it sounds like I'm still going to hear it, and it's still probably going to be somewhat of a nuisance. So that's one part of it. The other part is, you haven't said whether it causes hearing damage to the workers for the lawn crews.
Right.
And I would expect at 105. I've seen these guys out there without ear protection.
Most of them don't wear ear protection.
It's unbelievable.
So I can tell you what it sounds like next door. Because when I bought battery leaf blowers, I loaned them to my neighbor. And I said, I want you to use them to give me some feedback on what you think of it. And I want to be able to listen to it. And I live right next door. And right next door, what it sounds like a tea kettle. You know what a tea kettle was, a little whistling sound? It sounds like a tea kettle. It's not loud, and it's actually a pleasant sound versus a loud, unpleasant sound. The problem with gas leaf blowers is they create a lot of low frequency noise. Low frequency noise is very disturbing. It goes through walls, it goes through windows. It's much more annoying than high frequency noise.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
I guess I'm a particularly persnickety neighbor. I mean, I'm a raker. I just soon everybody get out and rake their leaves. Good exercise, all the way around. Good. Don't need these blowers.
So I've been a raker for many years. My aging back doesn't like raking as much as it used to. So I now augment it with battery leaf blowing, but I do. One of the things because I drag my leaves on a tarp, and it's almost impossible to blow leaves onto a tarp. Much, much easier to rake leaves onto a tarp.
That's what I do.
So Arnie's got a question.
Yeah, sorry for all the questions, but Paul, so I'm assuming if I'm a landscaper and I have my truck, I can carry around enough gasoline and oil to, last me the day, however many customers I have. I'm assuming that's not the case, but tell me if I'm wrong, with a battery leaf blower or other lawn equipment. And if that is the case, then how does the professional landscaper recharge during the day if he doesn't have enough spare charge batteries that he's carrying around with him? Does he rely on the customer?
Well, there's 3 ways to do it. There's a number of strategies here. Strategy 1 is you just buy enough batteries to last a day. Maybe 10 batteries per leaf blower. 10 batteries doesn't take up a lot of space. Okay, so you can, if you got 2 leaf blowers in your crew, 20 batteries. That'll be good for fall cleanup. You don't need that the rest of the year. So some people used to do that. The second thing is, as you suggest, in some towns that, they just charge on site. Almost everybody's got an outdoor outlet, and they just take their chargers with them and charge on site. Now, so Arnie, you probably know how big the battery is in an electric car, right? It's like 1,100 kilowatt hours or something like that, right?
Big battery. It's the
Big.
whole base of the car.
So Echo Quiet. So they're moving to Ford Lightning pickup trucks. Okay, a Ford Lightning pickup truck has a humongous battery. You could charge every battery. You could charge 100 batteries or 200 batteries a day. He just plugs them into his truck. He says he only needs 3 batteries per leaf blower. Probably only 2, one charging, one using. So the latest thing is, and what he says is that the Ford Lightning pickup trucks are not that expensive because all the guys with boats realized right away that their range was too short when you're pulling a big gigantic boat. And so they all bought Lightning pickup trucks and then sold them dirt cheap because they couldn't drag their boat with them. So he can get a Ford Lightning pickup truck with rebates and whatever, or used, for $30,000.
Okay.
$30,000 with a gigantic battery, no problem charging. And he's got now the battery commercial lawnmowers have really big batteries because you don't have to carry them. And what I've heard is they will last all day. So you don't have to recharge a battery lawnmower during the day.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, thanks. I didn't realize we have 2 F-150 all electric cars in our for our police department. They love them. I didn't realize you could get them.
Well, they can load them to the DPW in October and November when they're doing all the leaf cleanup. Okay. Okay,
Thank
now
you,
we're
Paul.
gonna. Pardon? We good here? Okay, now a quick look at pollution. This is the real shocker. Most people really don't, and I didn't either, understand this until you get a little bit of education. And so there's been studies done by Edmunds. They do a lot of car analysis, and in California, there's a government board called the California Air Resource Board, CARB, that does a lot of research about pollution. And so they've compared a 25-pound gas leaf blower, three horsepower, with a 450 horsepower, 6,000-pound Ford Raptor. So non-methane hydrocarbons, the carbon monoxide is only 23 times as much, not 300. Non-methane hydrocarbons, 300 times as much for the leaf blower. Nitrous oxides, 2 times. Carbon monoxide, 23 times. A gas leaf blower in use for 1 hour produces as much smog-forming pollution as driving a car 1,100 miles, the distance from Boston to St. Louis, Missouri, over 15 hours of driving. It's just staggering how much they produce in terms of pollution. So this is really, I think, the most telling slide that really gets people's attention is what does the pollution, the output of a leaf blower do to the workers in particular and to residents and neighbors. And so I'm not going to go. So Rick, did you send the slide set to various participants, or you will now that you know who's here? So you can go through the slide in detail. I think you can get it from Rick. And there is a tremendous amount of different kinds of pollution, and they affect the eyes, respiratory system, the heart, and they have impact on unborn children. So the thing here that's really the most egregious that I had no idea before I started getting into this is PM 2.5. PM 2.5 is particulate matter of 2.5 microns in diameter. On the upper right here, a human hair is 70 to 100 microns. PM2 is 2.5. A red blood cell is 8 microns. This is PM10, a larger form of pollution. This is a bacteria. It turns out, briefly, that PM2 when you breathe it, it goes into your lungs and into your alveoli, where the oxygen goes into the blood, and it's so small that it goes right into the bloodstream, and it circulates throughout your entire cardiovascular system, causing all kinds of problems to your heart, to your veins, to your arteries, really nasty stuff. And gas powered leaf blowers produce a lot of it. It's really not well understood. So when I presented at town meeting, there was one person that was saying, well, and so Acton, like Stow, knows a lot about PFAS because people have been educated on PFAS. They know nothing about PM 2.5. So I said, there's another kind of toxin, another P toxin you should know about. It's called PM 2.5. And this one guy that says, I should be able to do in my yard what I want. And I said, well, you know, maybe in some ways, but the PM 2.5 that you produce in your yard doesn't stay in your yard. And it goes into your neighbor's yards and into their lungs. And it's really, and particularly egregious for the operators of the equipment. So PM 2.5, look it up. It's really nasty stuff. So here's the greenhouse gas production. Probably you know more about this, that a leaf blower produces at 500 hours commercial usage, produces 4,500 pounds of greenhouse gas a year. If you charge your battery powered one on regular grid mix, you know it's 300 pounds per year. If you charge it on renewable energy, it's 0 pounds per year. So one full-size tree absorbs 48 pounds of CO2 per year. So if you're creating an Acton, I calculated we created 600,000 pounds of CO2 per year, you know, from gas leaf blower use. So that's a lot of trees that are being neutralized. Okay. So this, we did have a speaker. This is a woman I know. She is a Unitarian minister. She's Latino, and she spoke at town meeting about the impact of gas leaf blowers on minority workers. Most lawn care workers are Latinos, and they don't have a, you know, right now they're hiding for their lives. They're not going to come to town meeting and complain. And so she spoke at town meeting about the impact on the workers, which, as you can imagine, are the most impacted. So here's my final slide, is kind of getting back from toxic to tranquil. Stow and Acton are beautiful towns. We have wonderful conservation lands. And unfortunately, leaf blowers, you can hear a leaf blower a half a mile away. You know, let's get back to tranquil from toxic. And so that was my final slide. So questions?
Thank you. First of all, thank you. Any other questions? Bobby, do you have any questions? If you're there, you're on mute, I know.
Yeah, I do have a question. My question is, when you had this going in Acton, did you also have like a kind of a drive for getting rid of the old equipment to sort of encourage people? Like, here's how you can dispose of your old gas power equipment responsibly. That might be a good kind of pairing activity.
So good question. It turns out that there is actually a bill in the Massachusetts legislature to give rebates to towns and to commercial landscapers on, you know, turning in their equipment and buying new equipment. That bill is still in the Ways and Means Committee. We're hoping it gets passed. So if you email, I think Jamie Eldridge is probably your state senator. He's working on it. So definitely, you know, we're working with them to encourage them to get that bill passed. Also, Mass Save does have rebates. They have $30 rebate on a residential level leaf blower and $100 rebate on a commercial level leaf blower. So it's a modest amount, but there is some money there, you know, for rebates. Some towns have done buybacks where they buy the equipment back. So what we're hoping, so Acton has a sustainability department, and we're hoping that now that this has become, you know, a law that's going to be phased in over the next few years, that the Acton Sustainability Department will help out in working with landscapers. They did in Lexington, their sustainability department, their town department was very helpful to landscapers, and you know, they brought in manufacturers to give demos. They had loaner equipment and things like that. So there's a lot of things to help landscapers switch over. Also, some towns use the DPW to give training sessions to landscapers if they have adopted them already and use DPW. They know a lot about, obviously, that kind of equipment. And so there's a lot of ways to help landscapers over the hurdle.
Of course, then something has to happen to that equipment once it's been turned in and somebody's got it. I guess it gets sold for metal scrap or something.
Exactly. So in Acton, if you take it to the transfer station, it gets into the metal scrap pile and it gets sold to the metal scrap dealers, and they tear it apart and sell all the pieces for whatever they get for it. So one concern that some people have is that, well, you shouldn't throw away something that has carbon built into it, its useful life. And I think that's true for clothing and other things. But for a piece of equipment that actually produces carbon, you know, the best equation is to put it out of practice as soon as possible. You know, not try to get every ounce of carbon out of the handle and the crankcase.
Arnie's got a question.
Yeah, Paul, the law that that got passed in Acton and what other communities are doing, do they start out with leaf blowers, or do they and then sort of work their way up to other lawn equipment? I mean, we in Stow, we passed a single-use plastic bag bylaw with the idea that we'll go to polystyrene in a year or so. So how are towns doing this? And how is Acton doing?
That's a good question. Currently, so lawnmowers are substantially more expensive than leaf blowers. They produce substantially less dangerous pollution and they are more efficient. So I don't actually know of any towns, aside from the state of California, that is going after gas lawnmowers yet. I think typically where you go after gas lawnmowers, you need to provide substantial rebates to the landscapers in order to get them to buy it. And that's one of their big things is that you're going to go after our leaf blowers today, and tomorrow you're going to go after our lawnmowers. So we've tried to stay away from lawnmowers as much as possible. You know, we're just going for leaf blowers now. A few more years we'll go for lawnmowers, but we're not talking about it.
Okay. Alan's got his hand up.
He's
You're
on
on
mute.
mute, Alan.
So, Paul, does the Acton bylaw only apply to commercial users? How about homeowners?
It applies equally to homeowners and commercial users.
And what's the phase in? How does that work?
So the phase in, so the original proposal that went to town meeting was to go to a seasonal phase out on January 1st, 2027, which is basically no gas leaf blowers in summer and winter, and go to a year round in January 1st, 2028. But an amendment was passed that pushed that out 1 year. So the final bylaw is you go to seasonal on January 1st, 2028, and you go to year round on January 1st, 2029. I would rather it would be the year sooner, but that, democracy is about compromise, and I was willing to compromise.
I don't understand. What's the difference between seasonal and year round?
Seasonal, a lot of towns only have had seasonal bans for a while. So you don't really need gas leaf blowers from Memorial Day to Labor Day and from Christmas to March 15th. So
Yeah.
they say no gas leaf blowers during those two periods where there's not a lot of heavy duty leaf cleanup, but you can use them in the fall and in the spring.
Okay, a final question, shifting gears a bit. Any thoughts about electric snow blowers?
Well, in my case, I do still have my gas snowblower, but last year I used it once and this year I used it twice. So it seems that global warming is eliminating the need to ban gas-powered
Well,
snowblowers.
not
At least
entirely.
for the time being.
No, I have about an 18-year-old Aaron's, and I think it died. And
Mhm.
I'm going to be buying an electric snow blower, but I haven't done any research at all on how much power they generate versus the gas powered ones. I heard they're not as powerful as what I've heard.
I have a neighbor who has one. He's quite pleased with it. But what you probably want to do is buy your gas lawnmower and your gas snowblower from the same company so you can use the same batteries, because the batteries are not interchangeable between vendors.
Paul, could you just stop sharing your screen so we can see?
Sure. Screen.
Yeah,
Right.
good.
Thanks.
So do we have any other questions for Paul? Have we answered them all?
Yeah, I have one question about, Paul, how did you choose which type of leaf blower to buy?
So I did a lot of researching, and so Ego, it's EGO. They are the largest. They're all electric, and they had a product. They that was quite had good reviews. And the other thing about Ego is there are third-party batteries available. So the Ego batteries are about like $200 a battery, and you can buy that exact same battery, a third-party battery, for $100. So if you buy an Ego, and I think maybe one other has third-party batteries, so the availability of third-party batteries is a factor in terms of getting your costs down. The other thing, Ego had a fast charger. And so my leaf blower, I have one leaf blower with 2 batteries and 1 fast charger. And I can basically, plugging into my own outlet, I can run as long as I want to without a problem. So there's a lot of equipment coming on the market right now. Everybody's realized that the train has left the station. So you can go to Ace Hardware tomorrow and buy a battery leaf blower. I bought mine on Amazon. But there's also charging equipment that's coming out that's available. So there's a lot of product out there.
And you've got no, Alan's got a question.
Okay. And then I have a question.
And then you have a question. Okay. Alan,
Okay. What's the enforcement mechanism, Paul, if when this goes into effect? And is it the Board of Health, or how are you gonna, if somebody's out there violating the bylaw?
Good question. So the select board punted on that, and they said, we're going to let the town manager pick how he wants to enforce it when the time comes. So what other towns are doing is usually it's a combination of department and health and sometimes the police department. Bigger towns have a department called the Department of Inspectional Services, and they do all of the construction inspection and all that. And often, and like Waltham or Newton has a strict bylaw, has a strict noise ordinance, and they do it through the Department of Inspectional Services. In Washington, D.C., all you got to do is call it in, send it. There's a website. Just send in the address and the time and any information, a picture or a video, and nobody has to be there, and they will identify the landscaper and send them a bill.
Are there penalties that are specified in the bylaw?
The penalties are, I think, first violation warning, second violation $100, third and further violations $300. And residents and landscapers are liable to be fined. So if you're a resident hiring a landscaper and he's using gas leaf blower when it's banned, both the homeowner and the landscaper can be fined.
Oh.
Sharon?
So the question that I have is, oh no, I'm forgetting it.
You're getting your question.
What is your experience with getting landscapers to move to electric equipment as opposed to gas?
Typically, tremendous resistance, and that's why towns are having to go to legislation in order to do it. There's tremendous pushback. They really don't want to do it. So there is a lot of really strong opposition. So typically that's why you have to pass a bylaw. And even though it's really the best for their workers, they really love their gas equipment. And so that's why you have to make them change. Now, I think as more towns get on board and more landscapers have better equipment, that homeowners have more choice as opposed to buying battery versus gas, and there'll be some peer pressure to neighbors, et cetera. And so that might change as it becomes more prolific. But right now, it's very, there's a National Landscapers Association, and they are very hotly supporting, opposition to any bylaws. But the more and more towns, Martha's Vineyard 5 towns on Martha's Vineyard a couple of weeks ago passed bylaws phasing out gas-powered leaf blowers. So it is happening.
That's great. Well, congratulations for your success in Acton.
And Rick, thank you for help from First Parish Church and getting some First Parish Church. I saw some there, voting with their hands up. So I appreciate you and First Parish Church's help with that.
Well, hopefully Acton's experience will spill over to Stow in time. We'll see. Thank you very much. Great to hear from you. And congratulations.
Thank you. Take care.
Good night.
Good night. Okay, you want to start?